The Marvel studio has fallen into a crisis. I'm sure some of you have noticed that. And if you think that was just an unreasonable assumption, let's look at some numbers. Phase 4 of the cinematic universe started with the release of Black Widow on July 8, 2021, and ended with Black Panther on November 22nd. In just a year and a half, Marvel has released 7 films and 8 TV series. For comparison, Phase 1 had only 6 films in 4 years and a total of 746 minutes of content. Phase 3, which includes 2 films about the Avengers, has 1,500 minutes of content, and it's all compared to 3,500 minutes of content in Phase 4. Over the past 2 years, Marvel has released more projects than in the previous 12 years combined. At the same time, half of the films were box office failures, while the series' ratings fell so rapidly that it recently reached almost zero. By mid-2023, only 1 movie of all the studio's new projects grossed more than $1 billion at the box office. In the previous phase, there were 6 such movies. The new saga of the cinematic universe is an absolute anti-record holder in terms of audience ratings, and the latest TV series are watched by 25 times fewer people than the first ones. For example, Secret Invasion just recently scraped together the first 1 million views. I see my recently beloved Marvel studio falling step by step into the abyss. Previously, each studio film was an event with trailers analyzed for months and release dates circled on the calendar. Now, I don't even remember the last Marvel project that I managed to watch to the end, and my desire to be part of this cinematic universe disappeared completely somewhere between Hawkeye and the second Panther. And there are 2 explanations for this. The first one is that I changed, became more picky, and just outgrew the movies based on comics. Now I want something more complex, highly social and niche. Perhaps that's the reason. I'm not ruling it out. But there is a second explanation that has nothing to do with me. It's not me who has changed, but the studio, or more precisely, the approach to producing superhero films and blockbusters has changed completely. To check if this is the case, or if it's just apophenia, and why superhero movies have become so popular in general, we need to go back 20, or more precisely, 22 years, to one specific date, September 11th, 2001.
Ready, talk to me. Eddie, are you there?
After the September 11th terrorist attacks, which became the most major in mankind's history, everyone needed sources of hope and inspiration. There was a feeling that the scales of good and evil in the world had tipped, and to even it out, people needed some faith capable of coping with the horror after the terrorist attack. Superhero movies have become a life-saving pill that helped overcome fear and distrust. They offered viewers stories about heroes who fight evil and protect the innocent, reflected on the changes the terrorist attacks brought, and addressed new topics and conflicts based on the battle against terrorism and the protection of cities from attacks. Those superheroes have become symbols of hope, and this hope was so crucial at a time when it seemed that evil was everywhere, and there was no way to hide from it. Back then, the idea of battles against terrorism became the most relevant in the world cinema. A list of films from 2000: Munich, The Kingdom, United 93, Unthinkable, A Mighty Heart, Body of Lies, and many others. In 2008, ahead of Avatar, Catherine Bigelow's The Hurt Locker received the world's Key Film Award. Its plot revolves around the fate of a US Army bomb disposal expert fighting in Iraq. This trend is especially evident in superhero movies. However, the impact of the terrorist attack is not limited to showcasing the battle against terrorist organizations. It is much more profound. The very portrait of the movie villains has changed. During the pre-terrorist attack era, the image of the movie villain was based mainly on the experience of the Cold War, representing something distant, abstract, and often comic. But now, people suddenly realize that the real enemy could be hiding in the next room or turn out to be their colleagues or neighbors. The September 11th attacks showed people that absolutely no one could feel safe because the threat was right there on the streets. That's why Batman's enemy turns out to be his teacher, and Tony Stark gets betrayed by his own business partner. That's why the plot of so many films suddenly begins to take place in familiar New York, Washington, and London, where every destroyed object is a building that exists in real life. Suddenly, superheroes aren't just protecting an abstract world or restoring order in abstract America. Now, they are fighting for every US citizen. The emergence of superheroes in cinema is society's reaction to terrorist attacks and the search for ways to overcome fear and restore a sense of security. Therefore, there's no surprise that Iron Man begins his story with the fight against terrorism in 2008. Tony Stark of Marvel's Phase 1 takes an active part in the war in Afghanistan, and this experience convinces him of the ambiguous nature of Washington's policy of spreading democracy worldwide. It is this conflict that leads Iron Man to the path of the hero. However, in addition to the portrait of the supervillain, the protagonist has changed too. Let's go back to the starting point, Mr. Tony Stark. Stark does not need a traditional path to become someone. He is wealthy from birth and has an excellent education. His path is all about moral self-improvement. He behaves like a teenager who has to abandon entertainment and satisfaction of his desires in favor of something more. Actually, the decision of Jon Favreau, the director of the first 2 Iron Man movies, to choose Robert Downey Jr., who, like his prototype from the comics, survived the temptation of drugs and alcohol, for the lead role is what made Tony's transformation on the screen so authentic. And Stark's famous "I am Iron Man" symbolizes his willingness to take responsibility for his past and future actions, and it demonstrates the hero's maturity. Once again, Tony Stark's path begins from the point where he doesn't care about anything and everyone and goes towards indifference to the world around him. A little later in the Avengers, he sacrifices himself to save the planet by flying into space with a nuclear rocket.
You ever tried shawarma? There's a shawarma joint about 2 blocks from here. I don't know what it is, but I want to try it.
From that moment on, we see that Tony has stopped putting himself first. We see him as a man ready to do everything to save humanity. This idea would appear later, with a new force in Iron Man 3. In the Age of Ultron, he created an AI that should protect people from any alien invasions. In Infinity War, he fights with Thanos without hesitation. In the Endgame, he puts saving half of the universe above his personal happiness and completes his path with a snap of his fingers, sacrificing himself to save others. And I have a lump in my throat as I'm saying this. Tony Stark's story was so vivid. It was full of internal conflicts, searches, mistakes, and transformations. Iron Man is, first of all, a person we sympathize with, whose actions we understand, and whose transformation is exciting to watch. His story answers the question of why the old cultural mythology of the moral perfection of superheroes and the constant triumph of good over evil does not work. People are interested in people. A superhero is a diverse and complex character who grows and develops with the viewer, delighting us not with superpowers, but his moral qualities. Tony Stark was the core of the entire Marvel Cinematic Universe. Being the epicenter of the Infinity Saga, Tony's story gave meaning to all the events, and Marvel did a good job there. They beautifully finished his story, bringing his path to its logical conclusion. Stark's legacy is an unprecedented franchise that united millions of people and gave the world new heroes. Many of those heroes remained in the cinematic universe after the Endgame, and Marvel should have done something with them. The most evident illustration of what Marvel has become after Stark's departure is Asgard from the 4th Thor. The great Asgard, whose inhabitants were gods, turned into a children's amusement park with restaurants and playgrounds. All the events of the Infinity Saga, even such a terrible one as Thanos' snap, work for the brand. Even when a real tragedy hits Asgard, the local theater's actors think about whether they should put on a play about this too. After all, it hits the emotions of the viewer so well. Love and Thunder explicitly demonstrates what Marvel has become and who its target audience is now. In the film, children save everyone. Love and Thunder was more successful than several previous films in the franchise, in proving the theory that the new heroic gender is female, and who should become a laughing stock if not Thor, an outdated icon of caricatured masculinity, the past perfection. Waititi shows the world where real heroes have outlived themselves. Masculinity is no longer that precious, and no one takes the new creations of evil seriously anymore. The once great world with authentic conflicts, plots, and heroes has turned into an amusement park. Do you remember how a couple of years ago, Marvel fans got angry at Martin Scorsese for saying that superhero movies are not movies at all? Here is his original quote: "I don't watch them. I tried, you know, but this is not cinema. Honestly, the closest I can think of them, as well made as they are, with actors doing the best they can under the circumstances, is theme parks. It isn't the cinema of human beings trying to convey emotional, psychological experiences to another human being. Back then, everyone thought that Scorsese was exaggerating. However, now it seems that more and more viewers have this moment of epiphany. Modern Marvel is not about history, heroes, and plots. It feels that after the end of the Infinity Saga, Marvel failed to find a new key plot and got scared to do something actually new. Project by project, all this uncertainty lowers the audience's trust limit and discourages even the most devoted fans from watching new films. I found 3 main reasons why and where Marvel Studios took a wrong turn. Having experienced its renaissance after September 11th, the superhero movies, time after time, took the viewer into reality, where superheroes always defeated the obvious evil. The general audience loved watching such movies because they calmed them down, saving them from all the troubles and worries and leading them into a pseudo-reality that reproduced the same situation repeatedly. In the words of Francis Coppola, director of The Godfathers, superhero pictures is one prototype movie made over and over again to look different. This blockbuster type took over the Hollywood repertoire in the last decade and has frozen in a monotonously reproducible formula of success. For example, we have a good guy who gets some superpowers, masters them, encounters a villain who wants to destroy everything around him, loses to him, trains a lot, changes, and then wins, and so on and on and on. Superhero movies have become predictable and repetitive. As a result, it tired the audience. After all, if you watch at least one such film a year, you will sooner or later subconsciously remember this repetitive structure. These movies bring almost no new and original ideas to the table. They follow the same standard storylines and offer nothing new to the audience. Moreover, all Marvel Studios films have a similar style, which includes a combination of dynamic action scenes, humor, and catchy visual effects. If we combine all this, we'll get the most stereotypical film of the last 15 years, which you can easily draw in your mind. Yet, the reason for the superhero cinema crisis is not only tiredness from repetitive plots, but also the need to adapt to new challenges and problems of modern society. Nowadays, there are other threats at the forefront, and most of them are impossible to portray as supervillains who came to destroy the world. The pandemic, global warming, racism, economic inequality, the monopoly of companies, and totalitarianism. None of them can get defeated in the final battle of good against evil, and no superpowers will help here. Marvel films stubbornly resist global changes and continue to adhere to their philosophy. Time after time, we see a one-time villain who gets defeated by the film's end. That's why Todd Phillips' Joker or Kripke's The Boys were such a huge success. They put the superhero setting in the modern age that is relevant to us. They did what Iron Man did at the time, and that's why it worked. For example, The Boys addresses relevant social and political topics such as corruption, power, and media manipulation. The series asks questions about how far superheroes can go in their fight for justice and what consequences it can have. The series avoids standard superhero cliches and offers unexpected plot twists. It breaks all the patterns and swaps the moral guidelines, captivating the viewer. And while The Boys are a pretty niche product, Joker and Logan represent more mature and art house interpretations of superhero stories with an equal scale to Marvel. And yet, no author's experiments convinced the studio to change the structure of its films even a little. The more superhero blockbusters were released, the more they resembled each other. And here comes the second reason for the disaster Marvel is experiencing. Actually, this topic can be a separate video. Hollywood is undoubtedly in a severe crisis right now, and it was not started by strikes. In 2012, At the premiere of Lincoln, director Steven Spielberg appealed.
There's eventually going to be an implosion in Hollywood, or a big crisis. There's going to be an implosion where 3 or 4, or maybe even a half-dozen mega-budget movies are going to go crashing into the ground, and that's going to change the paradigm. The average Hollywood movie in 1992 was worth $25 million, and 5 years before that, it was worth $15 million. Today, the average movie costs under $100 million. Someday, Hollywood will collapse.
Perhaps one could have taken his words skeptically until the summer of 23. But today, when such mega projects as The Little Mermaid, Fast X, Mission Impossible, Indiana Jones, and Transformers, each with a budget of about $300 million, failed in one summer, it is obvious that Spielberg was right. Let's imagine ourselves as Steven Spielberg and reflect on why his prediction was so accurate. Looking at the wide release, we can identify several interesting patterns. The first pattern: the number of high-budget films increases dramatically every new year. Every studio strives to make a movie a big event, something similar to what an Avatar or Barbie is. To do this, it invests big money in a new movie, hoping to destroy the rest of the competitors at the box office. However, if you have Creed III, Shazam, Fury of the Gods, John Wick, Chapter 4, Scream 6, and Dungeons & Dragons released in March 2023 with a week difference, this does not mean that viewers will go to movie theater 5 times in a month. They will choose 1 or at most 2 films and watch the rest online. Therefore, some of the expensive projects do not collect the money they would have collected without competitors at the box office. The second pattern: the Hollywood franchising. Hollywood is run by businessmen who hate high risks. Therefore, if a project brings profit once, they will take advantage of it for years to come. Viewers already know the characters in the franchise's world, and according to big bosses, it can attract more attention and ensure guaranteed commercial success. The third pattern arises from the second one: remakes. Lara Croft, Jurassic World, The Little Mermaid, Cinderella, Snow White, Aladdin, The Jungle Book, The Lion King, Beauty and the Beast, Mulan, Pinocchio. If you open the list of Disney movies, you will see only remakes and sequels there. And we have the same explanation for this: an alleged recoupment guarantee. Let's add nostalgia to the film, spice it up with high technology, somewhat adapt it to modern times, and voila, commercial success is guaranteed. Plus, extra profit from monetizing the brand again. Such a pattern may have the right to live, but only if you use it for specific projects, not all of them. They already plan on making a movie adaptation of Moana. Come on, it was just released in 2016. For me, remakes are painful to watch. They aren't interesting, partly because the original versions were already perfect and did not need changes. Remakes deprive viewers of a new experience since they are a direct copy of already existing projects. In addition, remakes distract attention from new and original films, which often undeservedly go unnoticed. In recent years, Hollywood bosses have become too fearful. They are scared of original films because it's impossible to predict their commercial success. Therefore, the risks of creating them are too high. As a result, endless sequels and remakes occupied movie theaters, and they all have one goal: to make the viewer buy the tickets. And no one cares if you'll walk out of a theater unable to sit through the whole movie. In the fight for an audience, studios are spending more and more money on content production, and as a result, they are taking more and more risks if the film does not pay off. And if you think a movie with $200 million budget needs to raise $205 million to start making money, you're wrong. $200 million is only the budget of the film. They need half of this amount to promote the picture, which means the box office must be at least $300 million. But don't forget that cinemas take half of the box office for themselves. As a result, it turns out that a film with $200 million budget needs to earn at least 3 times more to break even. To sum up, at least $600 million. To further minimize the possible risks, producers adhere to proven scripts: hero, villain, victory. I've been describing them for 10 minutes already, a complete absence of originality. As a result, the quality of the films is poor. This path is obviously a dead end. Selling a somewhat identical story to the viewer every month for several consecutive years is a mediocre idea. It looks like Hollywood, for some reason, decided that louder and bigger means better. The more you play with special effects, the more you forget about everything else. Unlike studio bosses, Spielberg knew this already in 2012. In the current race, media giants have already forgotten about the quality of films. All they care about is that they come out according to schedule and do not allow viewers to leave the theater. But here's a paradox. Why would viewers go to the theater for a movie that tells them the same trivial story and spend more money on it than a monthly streaming service subscription costs? And here comes the third reason why Marvel is in crisis. In terms of the degree of influence on cinema, I would put the phenomenon of streaming services somewhere between the introduction of sound into films and the advent of television. It is truly a phenomenon. When Netflix released its first original series, House of Cards, in 2013, cinema entered a new era. Streaming services work according to a specific strategy. Do everything to keep the viewer on the platform as long as possible. Therefore, all content there is about making people stay on the platform for the sake of art. The only goal is to make the viewer watch the content indefinitely. For studio executives, the content is not an artistic statement or an author's experiment, but simply a viewer retention tool, just like the feed in TikTok. For instance, Netflix gives money to directors from different countries, not because it wants to diversify its content, but because it wants the viewers of each country to find something on the platform that will make them stay on it for another hour. Therefore, when streaming services give money to Scorsese and Fincher, it's not because they desire to support their creative idea. There is only a commercial calculation behind this, the desire to buy their viewers so that they join the platform. And everything would be fine if the word content, thanks to Patrick Williams for its definition, did not mean Scorsese's films, Mr. Beast's videos, and your feed on a social network at the same time. All this is content. Being a philologist, it hurts my ears when studio bosses put Cameron's Avatar and this in the same category. Streaming became a new goldmine for studios. Everyone rushed to create their own online streaming services, overwhelming the viewer with an abundance of content. When Disney launched its Disney Plus streaming service on November 12, 2019, no one thought it would become the studio's biggest mistake in history. As I said, the task of streaming is to drown the viewer in the content, and Disney approached the task as clumsily as possible. It decided to pour a lot of content into its service. In recent years, the head of the company, Bob Iger, has been buying up assets of other studios: Pixar, Lucasfilm, Marvel, and 20th Century Fox. Lots of viewers will buy Disney Plus subscriptions to have this variety in one service. By purchasing studios, Disney became the owner of those products that many people already love. It allowed Disney not to build a fan base ready to wait for new projects of their favorite universe, but immediately release what theoretically would be in demand. By now, the pieces of the puzzle you were putting together in your head while watching the video should form a complete picture. The reason why the number of projects in Marvel's Phase 4 exceeded all three previous ones is Disney's greedy desire to win the online streaming race. And this desire has a right to exist. But they made all these decisions so hastily that most of the released series didn't fit into the franchises. Moreover, almost all these series aren't series at all. They are films stretched over 6 episodes, and it's hard not to notice it. As a result, hurriedly filmed Marvel series, which no one needed, overshadowed such pearls as Andor or Turning Red, which did not reach a large audience. With this decision, the studio put the reputation of all its brands on the line and predictably lost. The artistry of their projects has noticeably faded, and the corporate fear of originality has ultimately turned the series into tasteless, identical projects. This simple, greedy desire to win the race is why Marvel started making films about costumes, not about the characters who wear them. The studio has become a television franchise, where each episode repeats the previous one and has the same pattern and setting. We know when to laugh, when the commercial will start, how long the episode is, and how it will all end. I admit that I'm really sad that my once beloved Marvel turned into all this. After watching the Endgame, I wished for a completely different future for this universe and, like many fans, built my own ideas about what would happen next. And contrary to popular belief that meddling in the multiverse was a fatal mistake, I think otherwise. The multiverse is almost the only correct vector where history could go after Stark's death. Endgame has gathered an incredible number of heroes on one screen. Most of them live on Earth, and this is actually a problem. Now, there should be at least a dozen characters in any next film where there is some serious threat. Remember how Cap's third solo film felt like another part of the Avengers? Such an abundance of characters is simply impossible to ignore, or it will look stupid. And that's exactly what it looks like. Spider-Man, Shang-Chi, Eternals. All events seem to take place on Earth, but they don't affect each other in any way. The events of one film do not exist in the world of another. Come on, what about that one Celestial who almost destroyed the planet? All these events not only do not exist in other films, but also do not affect the history of the film universe in any way. Yet almost the entire Phase 3 was a reflection of the Civil War. Yes, it's really not easy to fit everyone on one planet, but you have a multiverse. Don't you know how to use it? What's the meaning of the multiverse in modern art? Look at the most striking examples. Spider-Man through the universes and everything everywhere all at once. In both cases, the character's personality, life difficulties, and inner feelings are in the foreground. The multiverse is the opportunity to look at yourself from the outside, dive deeper, and explore and understand your inner world. I think Marvel should have devoted Phase 4 to delving into the abundance of already existing heroes. After such a well-developed character as Stark, they needed to do their best to make other characters look as unique and exciting. Of all the films after the Endgame, only Spider-Man more or less delved deeper into the hero through the multiverse. WandaVision had a nice try, but alas, imagine if the second Strange movie was a story told in one of the episodes of What If, where Strange loses his beloved and trying to bring her back to life starts practicing dark magic, splits his universe, and ultimately remains alone. Seriously, an adaptation of this plot would have skyrocketed Marvel's ratings. Several other episodes, where Stark and the entire Avengers team die, T'Challa becomes a Star-Lord, and Ultron defeats Thanos, would look no less cool as a film. Such stories can break the usual patterns. Diving into the personal stories of alternative heroes in other multiverses would undoubtedly benefit Marvel. Although we already know these heroes, they can still surprise us. There was no need to create another Thanos-level problem right away. You already have your audience, so make them love the characters even more. Tell your viewers something personal about them, and reveal what was left behind the scenes. The only project that fits perfectly into the concept of the multiverse is Loki, the first season of which I reviewed on my channel. It's one of my favorite videos. The god of trickery and deception was probably supposed to become the new central figure of the film universe, and this would have been Marvel's extremely successful decision, if not for the amount of content they had already filmed. After the end of the multiverse saga, Loki could become a replacement for Kang and guard the new sacred timeline. The creators made many hints about this. For example, it was through Loki that all the boundaries of the multiverses were revealed to the viewer. Then, by the time of the Secret Wars, where, according to the comics, the multiverse war would begin, Loki would know how to find contact with his alternative versions and would be able to find a way out of the absorption of some multiverses by others. Getting to know characters from various multiverses and seeing their deaths during the battles for a place in the sacred timeline would make the viewer empathize with different sides. It would make this conflict look way more acute and exciting. But Marvel doesn't have the guts for such bold decisions. After all, the studio needs to take several crucial steps at once to do this. It must move away from the traditional structure of its films, limit the number of projects produced, and give directors more creative freedom. And the last step, whether Marvel wants it or not, seems to be inevitable. Remember how I said the audience is overwhelmed with the same-looking films? Perhaps the viewer can go to the movie theater once or twice a month, but it will stop when the plot finally becomes 100% predictable. And sooner or later, this will happen, and no extra budget will help to keep the audience interested. We are already at the point where the probability that a blockbuster will become unprofitable and bring huge losses to the studio is greater than the probability that it will at least recoup the budget costs. Although the conveyor machine continues to create multi-million-dollar projects by inertia, they are doomed to failure. There was already a time in Hollywood history when the production of blockbusters was unprofitable. There was a belief that it was useless to invest in them since their huge budget would most likely be impossible to recoup, even despite the impressive box office results. Therefore, the studios preferred to invest in indie movies. They cost less, paid off faster, and in some cases also brought more profit than the most popular blockbuster. And all this enhanced the image of the studio. At that time, the large-scale visual effects and scenes ceased to impress the viewer because the film looked like a dummy without a good story and a well-written script. Back then, interesting films with unusual stories brought real profit. Therefore, it was much more profitable and cheaper to invest in a screenwriter who would create a good story and well-developed characters than to hire dozens of costume designers, decorators, actors, and stuntmen to shoot one large-scale scene, which ultimately would not work very well without a strong script behind it. This crisis of big movies has led to the emergence of that very new Hollywood, and many consider it the biggest cultural change since the birth of cinema. The vast majority of the greatest films were created during that period. But this era did not last long, and the people who ended it were George Lucas, Steven Spielberg, and James Cameron. I've already made videos about two of them. The trio criticized Hollywood for its lack of cinematic epicness, scale, and fiction. It's funny how we're criticizing films for the opposite qualities now. Their idea was to stop making everyday movies and turn to fantasy. Their intention was not to distract the viewer from the good stories. On the contrary, they wanted to improve digital effects to allow filmmakers to tell the most unusual stories. Each of them has contributed to the appearance of special effects in the cinema, which took the viewer further into unique, fictional worlds. They directed their discoveries to find new ways to experiment with the art of cinema, push boundaries, expand opportunities, and make the unreal possible. However, Hollywood studios understood them a little differently. The industry now had the false belief that an abundance of computer graphics and action could replace good movies. Studios have stopped giving priority to stories. The directors believed that technology would help make the stories better, but they probably never thought it would lead to Hollywood abandoning good stories in favor of special effects. This transition from good stories to good visual effects was not momentary. In the early 2000s, we could enjoy a combination of good stories and epic visual effects. The Lord of the Rings, Pirates of the Caribbean, Avatar. These films retained the spirit of real cinema and surprised the viewer with the scope of the narrative. But you already know what happened next. Here's the paradox. Today, computer technologies are used in cinema more than ever, but this does not mean people use them correctly and creatively. But technology didn't destroy the movies. Technology has expanded and continues to expand the boundaries of what is possible. Computer graphics did not harm the art of cinema. The cinematography was damaged by the greed of studio bosses who decided that special effects could replace good stories. And they're paying for this decision right now. Today, 8 out of 10 blockbusters become box office failures. The viewers made it clear they were tired of them. Now, the studios will have to look for another way out, and I think I know which way to look. Honestly, the answer has been right under our noses all this time, and the most attentive viewer already knows the answer. The only way out for the industry is to return to independent movies. New independent movies. Have you noticed what happened this summer? How surprising was the fact that Transformers, Marvel, The Little Mermaid, Indiana Jones, Fast X, and The Flash, which were released almost simultaneously, were not interesting to the viewer? As I have already said, you can't force viewers to go to the movie theater more than once or twice a month. Contrary to the opinion of the studios, viewers aren't fools. They know what will give them an unforgettable experience. Against the background of these mega blockbusters, the absolute winners were two films that no one bet on: Greta Gerwig's Barbie and Christopher Nolan's Oppenheimer. You can't really call these films blockbusters, yet they aren't independent movies either. And everyone knows Nolan, but only a few know about Greta Gerwig. She is a young independent movies director whom A24 helped create Lady Bird and Little Women. And if you think that Barbie is a super commercial studio project, two things should convince you otherwise. First of all, one of the producers was Margot Robbie, who is building her own A24. Secondly, the entire Barbie teaser mirrors Kubrick's 2001: A Space Odyssey. As a result, Barbie is the highest-grossing film of 2023, while Oppenheimer is the second highest-grossing film in history, with an 18+ rating. Hence, the answer to the question of whether major film studios can invest in independent films is yes, they can. It just takes a little more effort than putting special effects into a 2-hour movie. This phenomenon, the tandem of an independent movie director and a major studio, even has its name in film circles, an art blockbuster. This type of film is the main competitor of the superhero genre. An art blockbuster is a film that combines elements of art and commercial success. It can be a film with a high budget, impressive visual effects, a well-developed plot, complex characters, high-quality performance, and creative value. All this attracts a wide audience and helps achieve commercial success. Art blockbusters usually try to find a balance between profit and critical acclaim. When you watch an art blockbuster, you realize that it was made by people who care about the final result, who are ready to work on one movie for years to create something truly new, who spend every penny to make their dream project, who love the art of cinema and share their love with others.